On this day, the 30th of December, 1066, the Granada Massacre takes place. The massacre started when a mob of Muslims entered the palace in Granada, seized the Jewish Vizier, crucified him, and then continued to massacre Jews throughout the city. The Jewish Vizier who was crucified was a man called Joseph ibn Nagrela. He was 31 at this point, and he had become vizier a number of years before. He had inherited his position from his father. Not only was he the vizier, but he was also the rabbi and the leader of Iberia's Jews. So he was an important man. He was also in charge of a Jewish yeshiva school, a place where they go to study scripture. And so he was a learned man, and he was relied upon by the Berber king of Granada to be his first minister, his vizier. At this time, the Al-Andalus, the Muslim part of Spain, was not a united place. It was split into different regions, principalities, kingdoms, petty fiefdoms, all vying against each other, all fighting against each other, as well as fighting Christians. Sometimes the Christians would be in alliance with a Muslim against another Muslim. Sometimes they'd be in alliance with a Muslim against another Christian. Sometimes the Muslims would be fighting just each other. Sometimes they'd be fighting them with a Christian as ally, or sometimes their enemy would have a Christian as an ally. So it was a bit messy at this point in Spain's history. The Taifa period was after the collapse of the Umayyad dynasty, who had ruled all of Al-Andalus. And so Granada was one of the principalities of the kingdoms, the petty kingdoms within Muslim Spain. Many of the rulers were Berbers, so they were from over the water, modern-day Morocco. And being foreign in Spain, many times they liked to have someone who wasn't completely connected to the locals, because they didn't want them getting too popular. And educated Jews were often the people that they wanted as their ministers or advisors, because they could trust that that person has no power base locally, can never have a power base because there's just not enough of them, and this would guarantee loyalty to the king. However, it's a bit odd, this tale, because it is a very old tale. Over 1,000 years ago. Well, not over 1,000, almost 1,000 years ago. And he apparently was said to rule the king, so he was more powerful than the king. The king used to love getting drunk, and he spent most of his days drunk. The vizier had spies put throughout the palace to report back to him what the king was doing, and who he was with, what he said. It's said that court intrigue was something that this vizier was very good at. Now, the problem was that the king, Badis al-Muzaffar, and his heir were suddenly poisoned. Many people pointed the finger at Joseph ibn Nagrela. Whether or not they were true, I don't know. But what I do know is that Joseph then sent messages to the neighboring king, or ruler, of Almeria, a traditional enemy of Granada. he offered the ruler of Almeria complete subjugation of Granada to the ruler of Almeria if he made Joseph the king of Granada. Now, I'm not an expert in these things, but the king and his heir are suddenly poisoned, and Joseph is asking to be made king by a traditional enemy of Granada, then offers subjugation to that king so he can remain in power in Granada. Sounds pretty suspicious to me. But maybe it's propaganda, I don't know. But it is interesting. Very Game of Thrones sort of thing going on here. However, the ruler of Almeria backed out at the last minute. He, don't know why. I haven't seen any explanation as to why. And the problem was, Joseph was then left by himself. He had no king to protect him. He had no heir of the king to protect him. He had plenty of enemies who despised him because he had been at the top, not one of the other Muslim guys. And when the plot was leaked, whether or not the plot was even real, who knows? Maybe it was just made up by his enemies. But when that plot was leaked, that's when the mob came into the palace, captured him, and crucified him. Crucifixion is a pretty awful way to die. It usually takes days. And during that time, because the way you're up on the cross, you are in effect being tortured to death. That was his fate. As a result of this incident, whether or not Joseph was conspiring to do all these things, whether he did kill the king and the heir to the throne, whether he did try to get the throne himself by prostrating himself in front of the king of Almeria, whatever the reality, he died. And this led to a pogrom of the local Jews. We're not really sure how many died, but could have been at 4,000. It said about 1,500 Jewish families were killed, wiped out. Joseph's wife managed to get away in the chaos with her son. But most of the Jews of Granada were not so lucky. So I don't know whether this is a tale of being careful about your actions, may rebound upon you and your own, or perhaps it is a tale of a persecuted minority being singled out because he was too powerful. It's hard to know through all the centuries that have gone, but it must have been a pretty terrible night for the Jews of Granada. If you like these videos, come back for more tomorrow. Subscribe, comment, and like.